For decades, growth has been our compass. Growing again and again was seen as a sign of success. But what happens when this way of thinking runs into the limits of our planet? Climate disruption, social tensions, and resources running out. What if the company of tomorrow isn't the one that grows the fastest, but the one that contributes the most?
Welcome to Net Positive Business by EDHEC Business School, a podcast exploring the net positive concept, its fundamentals, and how to implement it into corporate strategy. Today, the growth-focused model is starting to show its limits. To shed some light on the transitions now underway, we spoke with Thomas Long, a specialist in sustainable entrepreneurship at EDHEC Business School. We started by asking him a simple but fundamental question: why is growth alone no longer enough?
So why is growth alone no longer enough? Well, we've been experiencing really quite profound economic and technological progress, and this has been termed the Great Acceleration, and you see quite dramatic increases in a range of socioeconomic and environmental indicators. However, on a macro scale, it's now clear that we've reached some planetary limits. And so to continue on this track is becoming quite risky. In this context, continuous pursuit of growth as a proxy for success becomes problematic.
If infinite material growth is no longer sustainable, then it's our very idea of progress that needs to be reinvented. What Thomas Long explains to us points to three major shifts: moving away from growth at all costs, broadening the purpose of the company beyond profit, and seeing the company as an actor of regeneration, not just production. It's a deep shift, but also a huge opportunity to rethink entrepreneurship, which leads to another key question: should the word growth still be at the heart of company strategy?
Now, one response to this challenge is to try and decouple these environmental impacts from economic growth, primarily through technological innovation. And this is termed green growth. And there's some limited evidence for this decoupling happening, but often it's not at a sufficient scale, i.e. this decoupling needs to be global. It's also often not of a sufficient degree, i.e. we're often seeing relative rather than the necessary absolute decoupling. And it's also not yet certain that it's going to be sufficiently sort of sustained over time. So all of which are necessary if we're going to go for decoupling green growth as like the plan to solve this environmental challenge. And here the question is maybe no longer how do we grow faster, because this is problematic because more growth is equally more environmental impact, but rather what kind of economic activity is actually going to improve the world we operate in or we live in without growth.
In other words, the debate isn't for or against growth, but what kind of prosperity do we want? After asking why, it's time to know how. Post-growth doesn't mean giving up on performance. It means redefining what we measure.
In a post-growth perspective, profit doesn't necessarily disappear. And you can see that, I guess, companies exist often because they're providing something valuable to society. And the key question is valuable for whom and also at what cost? So I think growth has become quite like a blunt approach. So it's important to build a picture of what alternative models could look like, to have good examples of businesses that are more focused on delivering sort of regenerative, sufficiency-oriented business models. All these types of alternatives, I think, have a lot of promise. So we're seeing that entrepreneurs can and already do design businesses that don't rely on endless expansion. But a post-growth orientation opens up a whole, I guess, different design space for entrepreneurs and business models. So the aim and goal of the innovation goes from maybe being focused on economic returns and efficiency towards things like resilience and regeneration.
We're moving from a logic of output to a logic of relevance. Regeneration, circularity, functionality, these are more than concepts. They're the economic frameworks of the 21st century. Perhaps the most exciting promise is this: the future belongs to entrepreneurs who can reinvent the rules by imagining new business models, integrating sustainability, simplicity, and regeneration, reshoring, repairing, and extending product lifespans. It's a huge field for innovation, a space where impact drives value creation. But do big companies have a role in this transformation? Or is it only for agile startups?
Well, large corporations play a key role simply because of their size and influence. If you could crack this giant nut, then the sustainability rewards, are potentially immense. Mission-driven models are, I think, an important first step, but mission alone is often probably not going to be enough. You also have to address aspects like operations, the resources and material that you're bringing in, incentives, as well as the financial models.
The message is clear. Big companies can be accelerators as long as mission, operations, and finance are aligned. One can't work without the others.
So instead of pushing companies to endlessly expand, post-growth asks them to maybe stabilize, to focus on quality improvements, to reduce harm, and ideally to regenerate system components that have been damaged. And the mission-driven business models that we start to see emerging are a step in the right direction. The barriers are not really technological, they're more behavioral, cultural, and institutional. And I think expectations around what progress looks like, especially expectations around growth, are really deeply embedded. And moving beyond it is really going to require new narratives of success, new incentives, and a willingness to challenge what we've taken for granted for decades.
Changing business models is possible, but changing mindsets is essential. And it's a collective effort that involves employees, customers, suppliers, and communities. Post-growth isn't about giving up. It's a shared project. To conclude, traditional growth is reaching its limits. Sustainable entrepreneurship opens up a whole new space for innovation. Big companies and startups have complementary roles. The real challenge now is moving from the why to the how. So how do some companies put net positive into practice on a daily basis? Which indicators actually measure this ambition? How can employees, customers, and partners be brought on board? And why can this concept redefine the role of businesses? Find all the answers in Net Positive Business by EDHEC Business School, the podcast that explores the net positive concept, its fundamentals, and how to implement it into corporate strategy. Feel free to share this podcast and subscribe to catch all new episodes.